Listen carefully, because this isn't just a story about a girl. It's a story about hunger, the kind that lives in your bones. The kind that doesn't let you sleep. The kind that either breaks you or builds you. Her name was Precious. Precious grew up in a part of the city most people only pass through with their windows rolled up. The streets were dusty, the houses were crowded, and opportunities were as rare as rain in the dry season. Her mother sold vegetables by the roadside, waking up before sunrise every single day. Her father had once been a strong man, but years of hard labor and disappointment had slowly worn him down. There was never enough money. Not for new clothes. Not for books. Sometimes, not even for food. But Precious had something far more dangerous than money. She had a dream. From a young age, she loved school, not because it was easy, but because it felt like an escape. While other children complained about homework, Precious held onto her notebooks like they were treasures. She would sit under a flickering lantern at night, reading the same worn-out textbooks over and over again, determined to understand every word. Her teachers noticed her. Not because she spoke the loudest, but because she never gave up. Even when she didn't understand something, she would stay back after class to study more. "Why do you try so hard?" one teacher once asked her. Precious smiled softly and said, "Because I don't want to stay here forever." That answer stayed with the teacher. Months later, a life-changing announcement came. A prestigious private school, one of the best in the entire country, was offering a full scholarship to one outstanding student from underprivileged backgrounds. It was the kind of school people only saw in movies. Big classrooms. Clean uniforms. Students who arrived in expensive cars. A place where the children of the rich and powerful studied. For Precious, it sounded like a completely different world. The application process was tough. Written exams. Interviews. Assessments that pushed students to their limits. Many gave up halfway. But not Precious. She studied harder than she ever had before. She borrowed books. She practiced questions late into the night. Because deep down, she knew. This was her chance. The day the results were announced, the entire school gathered around a notice board. Students pushed and shouted, trying to see the list of names. Precious stood at the back. She didn't rush forward. She didn't push. Her heart was beating so loudly it felt like the whole world could hear it. Then suddenly, someone shouted, "Precious! Your name is here!" For a moment, everything went silent. She slowly walked forward, her legs trembling. Her eyes scanned the list once, twice, and then she saw it. Her name. Right at the top. Precious had won the scholarship. Tears filled her eyes instantly. Not loud, dramatic tears, just quiet ones that rolled down her cheeks as she stood there, staring at the paper like it might disappear if she blinked. When she got home and told her parents, her mother dropped the basket she was holding and hugged her tightly. Her father didn't say much, but for the first time in years, there was pride in his eyes. It felt like everything was about to change. And in many ways, it did. But what Precious didn't know was that getting into that school was the easy part. Because sometimes, the hardest battles don't begin until after you win. The first day she arrived at the new school, everything felt overwhelming. The buildings were huge. The floors were spotless. Students walked around confidently, dressed in perfect uniforms that looked like they had never been worn before. Precious looked down at hers. It was clean, but clearly not new. She could already feel the difference. As she walked into her classroom, conversation slowly died down. Eyes turned. Some curious, some judgmental. She sat quietly at the back, trying not to draw attention to herself. But attention found her anyway. "Hey, are you the scholarship girl?" someone whispered loudly. A few students laughed. Another voice followed, "She doesn't even look like she belongs here." Precious felt her chest tighten. She tried to ignore it. Tried to remind herself why she was here. But deep inside, something shifted. For the first time in her life, Precious felt small. And the worst part? This was only the beginning. You see, winning a chance is one thing. But surviving where you're not wanted? That's a completely different battle. Precious learned that faster than she expected. From the moment she stepped into that school, it was clear she wasn't like the others. And in a place like that, being different wasn't something people admired. It was something they noticed and used against you. At first, it was subtle. Whispers when she walked past. Side glances that lasted just a second too long. Small laughs that stopped the moment she looked up. Precious tried to convince herself it didn't matter. She told herself she was imagining things. That maybe, just maybe, if she focused on her studies, everything else would fade into the background. But it didn't. It got worse. One morning, during break time, Precious opened her lunch container, only to find it empty. She froze. She was sure she had packed food before leaving home. Her stomach tightened, not just from hunger, but from the quiet laughter she could hear behind her. "Oh, did your food run away?" a girl said, her voice dripping with mockery. Another added, "Maybe it couldn't survive in this school either." The group burst into laughter. Precious didn't say anything. She simply closed her container slowly, her fingers trembling just a little. She could feel their eyes on her, waiting for a reaction. But she refused to give them one. Instead, she stood up and walked away. But inside? It hurt. It hurt more than she wanted to admit. And that was only the beginning. In class, things weren't much better. Whenever Precious raised her hand to answer a question, someone would roll their eyes. If she got something wrong, the laughter would echo louder than necessary. Even when she got things right, there was no applause, only silence, as if her intelligence made people uncomfortable. Slowly, something began to change. The girl who once loved answering questions started to hesitate. The girl who once studied with excitement began to feel tired. The girl who once believed in herself started to doubt. Precious would go home each day, sit with her books open, and just stare at the pages. The words were still there, but her focus wasn't. Her mind kept replaying the voices, the laughter, the feeling of being out of place. "Maybe they're right," she thought one night. "Maybe I don't belong here." It was a dangerous thought. Because once it enters your mind, it doesn't leave easily. Her grades began to slip, not drastically, but enough for her teachers to notice. The same teachers who once praised her now looked at her with concern. One afternoon, her class teacher called her aside. "Precious," she said gently, "what's going on? This isn't like you." Precious forced a small smile. "I'm fine, Ma." But the teacher wasn't convinced. "You don't have to pretend here," she added softly. For a moment, Precious almost spoke. Almost let everything out, the bullying, the loneliness, the pressure. But she didn't. Because she had learned something important. Sometimes, when people don't understand your world, explaining it feels pointless. So she just nodded and walked away. Days turned into weeks. And the bullying didn't stop. It evolved. Now it wasn't just words, it was exclusion. Group projects where no one wanted her. Invitations she never received. Conversations that stopped the moment she joined. She was there, but never really included. And loneliness? It has a way of making everything heavier. One day, after school, Precious sat alone under a tree near the edge of the compound. It had become her safe place, the one spot where no one bothered her. She placed her bag beside her and let out a deep breath. For the first time since she arrived at that school, tears filled her eyes. Not loud sobbing. Not dramatic crying. Just quiet tears. The kind that fall when you're tired of being strong. "I tried," she whispered to herself. "I really tried." At that moment, she wasn't thinking about success. She wasn't thinking about the future. She was just thinking about giving up. And that's the thing about breaking points. They don't come with warnings. They come when you least expect them. But sometimes, just when you're about to fall completely, something or someone steps in. Precious didn't know it yet, but her story was about to change. Because someone had been watching her. Someone who didn't laugh. Someone who didn't judge. Someone who saw her, not as the poor girl, but as something much more. And very soon, their paths were going to cross. Sometimes, all it takes is one person. Just one. To remind you that you're not invisible. Precious didn't believe that at first. After everything she had been through in that school, she had stopped expecting kindness. It felt safer that way. If you expect nothing, nothing can disappoint you. So she kept to herself. Quiet. Careful. Distant. The tree close to the class had become her routine. It was the only place where she didn't feel watched or judged. Just a small corner of peace in a place that constantly made her feel like she didn't belong. That afternoon was no different. Ada sat under the tree, her bag beside her, flipping through her notes without really reading them. Her mind was elsewhere, lost in thoughts she didn't want to face. Then she heard footsteps. Slow. Calm. Not rushed like the others. She didn't look up at first. Most students didn't come to that part of the compound, so she assumed whoever it was would just pass by. But the footsteps stopped. Right in front of her. Precious hesitated, then slowly lifted her eyes. And that was the first time she saw him. His name was Fred. Now, Fred wasn't just any student. He was the kind of person everyone in school knew, even if they had never spoken to him. Tall, confident, effortlessly calm. The kind of boy teachers respected and students admired. And the girls? They adored him. But Fred didn't seem interested in any of that attention. He carried himself differently, not proud, not arrogant, just quiet in a way that felt intentional. Which made this moment even more confusing. Because out of everyone in that school, he had chosen to stop in front of her. Precious, right, he said. His voice was calm. No mockery. No hidden laughter. Just normal. Precious blinked, slightly caught off guard. Yes. He nodded, as if confirming something. Then, without asking, he sat down on the grass, not too close, not too far. Just enough to feel present. For a moment, neither of them spoke. And strangely, it wasn't awkward. I've seen you here a few times, he said after a while. Precious tightened her grip on her notebook. I like quiet places. That makes sense, he replied. That was it. No teasing. No unnecessary questions. Just understanding. It felt unfamiliar. Most people in that school either ignored her or made her feel uncomfortable. But Fred? He wasn't doing either. He was just there. And somehow, that alone made a difference. Days passed. Then something unexpected happened. Fred came back. Not once. Not twice. But almost every day. At first, their conversations were simple. School. Subjects. Random observations. Nothing too personal. But slowly, they began to grow. Precious found herself talking more. Laughing, something she hadn't done in a while. And for the first time since joining that school, she didn't feel like she had to shrink herself. Fred never treated her like she was less than anyone else. He never mentioned her background. Never made her feel different. To him, she was just Precious. And that meant everything. But of course, in a place like that school, nothing goes unnoticed. It started with whispers. Why is Fred always with her? What does he even see in her? She's just the scholarship girl. The same voices. The same judgment. Only this time, it wasn't just directed at Precious. It was directed at both of them. The girls who admired Fred the most didn't take it lightly. To them, Precious wasn't just an outsider anymore, she was a problem. Because somehow, she had the attention they all wanted. And Fred? He didn't care. One afternoon, as they sat under the tree, Precious hesitated before speaking. "You don't have to keep coming here, you know," she said quietly. Fred looked at her. "Why would I stop?" Precious looked down. "People are talking." He let out a small breath, not annoyed, not surprised. Just aware. "They always do," he said. "But it's different now," Precious added. "They're saying things about you too." For a moment, Fred was silent. Then he said something Precious would never forget. "I don't choose people based on what others say about them." Precious looked up at him. "And I definitely don't stop being friends with someone just because it makes other people uncomfortable." There was no hesitation in his voice. No doubt. Just truth. And in that moment, something shifted inside Precious. For so long, she had felt like she had to fight this battle alone. Like the world was against her, and she just had to endure it. But now? She wasn't alone anymore. Someone was standing beside her. Not out of pity. Not out of obligation. But by choice. And that kind of support? It changes everything. But what Precious didn't fully realize yet was that this friendship was about to be tested. Because sometimes, when people can't control you, they try to break what gives you strength. And the question was no longer just about Precious surviving the school. Now it was about whether both of them could withstand what was coming next. Here's the truth people don't talk about. When you finally start to heal, when you finally find your strength again, that's when life tests you the most. Precious didn't expect things to get easier after meeting Fred, but she didn't expect them to get worse either. At first, having him around felt like protection. The whispers didn't stop, but they didn't cut as deeply anymore. The laughter was still there, but it didn't echo as loudly in her mind. Because now, she had someone who reminded her of who she really was. But not everyone was happy about that. Especially the girls who had spent years trying to get Fred's attention. To them, Precious wasn't just different anymore, she was a threat. And jealousy? It has a way of turning quiet dislike into loud cruelty. It started small. A missing notebook. A chair pulled away just as she was about to sit. Group chats where everyone was included, except her. But this time, it wasn't random. It was intentional. Targeted. One afternoon during class, the teacher asked a difficult question, one that most students avoided. Precious hesitated for a second, then slowly raised her hand. She knew the answer. The class went quiet. The teacher nodded. "Yes, Precious." She stood up, her heart beating fast, but steady enough to speak. And she answered perfectly. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then someone clapped. Slow. Mocking. Deliberate. "Well done," a girl said with a smirk. "Did you memorize that from your old, broken books?" Laughter followed. Precious froze. The answer she had just given, the one she worked so hard for, suddenly didn't feel like an achievement anymore. It felt like a mistake. Her confidence dropped instantly. She sat down slowly, her hands slightly shaking. From across the room, Fred was watching. And for the first time, he didn't stay silent. "That was unnecessary," he said calmly. The room went quiet again, but this time, the silence felt different. Tense. The girl who spoke earlier rolled her eyes. "Oh please, Fred. You don't have to defend her all the time. I'm not defending her, he replied. I'm just pointing out that you're wrong. A few students shifted uncomfortably. No one expected him to say that. The girl scoffed, clearly annoyed. You've really changed. Fred didn't respond. He didn't need to. But from that moment on, things escalated. Because now, it wasn't just about Precious being different. It was about Fred choosing her friendship over everyone else. And that made people angry. Very angry. The bullying became more direct. More public. More personal. And even though Precious tried to stay strong, it started affecting her again. She began to withdraw, and not just from others, but even from Fred. She spoke less. Avoided eye contact. Sometimes, she didn't even go to their usual spot under the tree. Not because she didn't want to see him, but because she didn't want to drag him into her problems. One evening, as she packed her bag quickly after class, Fred approached her. You've been avoiding me, he said. Precious paused. I've just been busy. With what? He asked gently. She didn't answer. Because the truth was, she was scared. Scared that his life would become harder because of her. Scared that one day, even he would get tired of the drama. Scared of losing the only good thing she had in that school. I don't want you to get hurt because of me, she finally said quietly. Fred looked at her, really looked at her. Precious, he said, you're not a problem. She shook her head. You don't understand. No, he interrupted softly, you don't understand. She went silent. I choose to be here, he continued. No one is forcing me. Not them. Not you. His voice was calm, but firm. And if people have a problem with that, then that's their problem. Not ours. Precious felt something tighten in her chest. Emotion. Fear. Relief. All at once. But what if it doesn't stop, she asked. Fred didn't hesitate. Then we keep going anyway. Simple words. But powerful. And in that moment, Precious realized something important. Strength doesn't always mean fighting back loudly. Sometimes, it means refusing to give up quietly. The next few weeks weren't easy. The bullying didn't magically disappear. The whispers didn't suddenly stop. But Precious changed. She started focusing again. Slowly at first, but steadily. She answered questions again. Studied again. Stayed back after class again. Not for them. Not to prove anything. But for herself. And Fred? He stayed. Through every awkward moment. Through every uncomfortable silence. Through every challenge. He never left her side. And that kind of loyalty? It's rare. But here's the thing about storms. They don't last forever. And while Precious couldn't see it yet, everything she was going through, every tear, every doubt, every moment of pain, was shaping her into something stronger than she had ever been. Because one day, the same girl they laughed at would become someone they could never ignore. And when that day came, everything would change. Let me tell you something. People will doubt you. They will laugh at you. They will try to make you feel small. But if you don't give up, one day, they will have no choice but to watch you rise. Precious didn't become successful overnight. There was no sudden miracle. No moment where everything just fell into place. It was slow. Painfully slow. After everything she had been through, rebuilding herself took time. There were still days she felt insecure. Days when the voices from the past tried to creep back into her mind. But the difference now? She didn't listen to them anymore. Precious focused on her studies like never before. She woke up early, studied late, asked questions again without fear, made mistakes, and learned from them without shame. She remembered why she started. And that was enough. By the time final exams approached, something had changed. Not just in Precious, but in how people saw her. The same students who once laughed at her now watched her quietly. The same classrooms that once made her feel small now became places where she stood tall. Because Precious wasn't hiding anymore. She was shining. The day the results were released, the entire school gathered once again, just like before. But this time, Precious didn't stand at the back. She stood right in the middle. Calm. Steady. Ready. Her heart still beat fast, but not from fear. From confidence. As the results were announced, a hush fell over the crowd. And then, her name was called. First place. In the entire school. For a moment, no one spoke. It was like the world had paused, just long enough for everyone to realize what had happened. The girl they mocked. The girl they excluded. The girl they said didn't belong. Was now the best among them. And this time, there was no laughter. Only silence. Followed by something unexpected. Applause. Real applause. Not forced. Not fake. Genuine. Precious stood there, taking it all in. Not with pride, not with arrogance. But with quiet strength. Because she knew something they didn't. This wasn't luck. This was earned. As she stepped down from the stage, her eye searched through the crowd, and found him. Fred. He didn't clap loudly. He didn't shout. He just smiled. And somehow, that meant more than everything else combined. Years passed. School ended. Life moved forward. But Precious didn't stop there. She carried that same determination into everything she did. University. Career. Life. It wasn't always easy. There were new challenges. New doubts. New battles. But Precious had already learned the most important lesson. She could survive anything. And Fred? He was still there. Not just as the boy who sat under the tree with her, but as the man who stood beside her through every stage of life. Their friendship grew into something deeper. Stronger. Unbreakable. He believed in her when she doubted herself. Supported her when things got hard. Celebrated her wins like they were his own. And slowly, love found its way in. Not loud. Not rushed. But real. The kind of love built on understanding. On respect. On shared struggles and silent support. Years later, on a calm, beautiful day, they got married. Not in the biggest ceremony. Not with the most expensive decorations. But surrounded by people who truly cared. And as Precious stood there, holding Fred's hand, she remembered everything. The dusty streets she came from. The nights she studied under a weak lantern. The laughter. The pain. The loneliness. All of it. And she smiled. Because every single moment had led her here. To a life she once only dreamed of. To a love she never expected. To a version of herself that refused to give up. They built a life together. A home filled with laughter, peace, and something Precious never had growing up. Stability. They had children, bright, curious, full of life. And Precious made sure of one thing. Her children would never feel small. Not because of where they came from. Not because of what they had. But because she would teach them what she had learned the hard way. Your beginning does not define your ending. And somewhere out there, in a school just like the one Precious once struggled in, there is another girl. Sitting quietly. Feeling unseen. Fighting battles no one understands. But if she hears this story, maybe, just maybe, she'll realize something powerful. Kindly comment, like, share and subscribe to this YouTube channel for more educational story like this.